If someone were to ask you how old you are, how would you begin to answer? Would you be thinking of a numeric number? Would you think of a figure? If so, you'd be thinking in terms of one dimension of age, but actually there are 5 that exist, not often spoken about, but 5 dimensions of aging. The first one, if we answer with a specific number, is called chronological aging. It relates to the passage of time, and specifically, we think back to the time of our birth. And that's the number that one can easily calculate if we look at a driver's license, or if we look at a date that's stamped in our passport. It's very common that people in the United States, in North America, think in terms of responding in terms of their chronological aging. But there are 4 other dimensions that are actually very important as well. The second dimension of aging is called biological, and that relates to our measurement of physical processes. We can measure these in very concrete ways through exams in physician's office. So a person could be at a biological age of maybe 25 years if he or she had been an Olympic athlete. Well, in fact, the chronological age may calculate at 50 or 60 or 65 years, but depending on physical conditioning, on exercise, on dietary, lifestyle patterns, they can actually appear biologically a lot younger than their chronological age might suggest. There's a third dimension of age, and that's called psychological. And the psychological functioning is more variable. There are often, in my field of lifespan psychology and adult development, there are many theories of psychological development. One of the most famous was offered by Erik Erikson, and he had a theory of 8 stages of psychosocial development. And each individual will progress through these various stages at an individual, never a universal pace. So there's a lot of variability within the psychological dimension of aging. Now there's a 4th dimension of aging, and that's called the social aspect. Social aging is a person's progression through some socially defined milestones. And when you hear the term socially defined, it means that those milestones are culture specific. They're not the same in the United States or North America as they would be perhaps in Asia or Africa or the Middle East. So an example of a social milestone would be the age at which people tend to choose their life's career and think about deciding on a major in university life or later on career selection. It can be very different periods of life that we will make those choices depending on culture. Another example of a socially defined milestone would be the time that we begin thinking about marriage, or the time we might think about starting a family, or later on the time we might begin to contemplate retirement and what that will be like in terms of changes in our relationship with ourselves once we leave the work role, and relationship with other people, perhaps as we retire back into the household with a spouse and have changes in communication patterns and changes in needs for personal space or privacy. So that's the 4th dimension of age. It's called the social aspect. Now there's one final dimension that's very important. It is called the perceived dimension of age. You can think about that by asking yourself, what might be my internal sense of age? How do I self-define as I think about my progression through the whole life cycle? Perceived age is very clearly expressed as how old you might feel. So many people have heard about individuals who are in their 70s and 80s who actually self-define at about 38 or 40 or 45 years old. Because in fact, internally, their sense of themselves and the periods of life where they have felt the most alive and have experienced the most richness, they might be decades in the past rather than something about the present day reality. So when you think about answering the question, how old am I? It might be nice to keep in mind that there are 5 dimensions, recalling that a person can actually be progressing at a different level through each of those dimensions. Chronologically, they may seem much younger than their number of years since birth, and they may be socially a little bit shy or backward, not having gone through all of the challenges that some other people would have at a certain age. And in addition, this very important criteria of perceived age, which in fact may represent almost a sum total, a more accurate sum total of the other 4 dimensions. So perceived age is really important for most people because it seems to evoke the landscape of memory. It helps people to think about decades of life that felt richer and vivid, and also it helps them to be imaginative in thinking about their own identities, because we all develop our identities at various stages of life in various decades. So in fact, your internal sense of your age may be the most accurate considering all of the 5 dimensions.